Food is the moral right of all who are born into this world. Norman Borlaug. It was late 1944. Across Europe and the Pacific, the deadliest war in history was reaching a climax. Hope was scarce and food scarcer. World leaders were fearing a mass famine. But behind the front lines, a massive scientific frontier was in the making. In Mexico, the then recently founded Cooperative Wheat Research Production Program, part of a joint program between the Mexican government and the Rockefeller Foundation, was attempting to redefine modern agriculture. Among the scientists recruited was Norman Borlaug, a sprightly 30-year-old farmer from Iowa. Within 15 years of being hired, he had created a new high-yield crop that permanently changed global agriculture, and a groundbreaking method for faster breeding. A few years later, in the early 1960s, Borlaug spread his innovations to South Asia. His efforts helped pioneer the Green Revolution, a frontier in agriculture credited with saving over 1 billion lives. For his endeavors, Borlaug was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1970. Although the Green Revolution was flawed in many ways, Borlaug's scientific tradition continues today to help fight world hunger. Throughout the early 20th century, the world population was facing a mounting food crisis. With World War II raging, all economies were focused on the production of war materials. But behind the scenes, world leaders were fearing mass starvation. Buried under headlines about the war in Europe, articles titled, "War and Migration Take 4,748,000 from Farms," "Farm Population Declines," and 3 million births, record for a year, painted a dark theme. With fewer farmers, more people to feed, and less available land for agriculture, world leaders had to start scrambling for solutions. Norman Ernest Borlaug was born on March 25, 1914, on a northeastern Iowan farm. He spent his childhood peacefully, cultivating and harvesting corn with his parents and grandparents on their farm. He attended a one-room school 1.5 miles from his house, being taught by an older cousin. However, he had greater aspirations. When he turned 18, he applied for admission to the University of Minnesota. He decided to major in forestry, his passion, at the College of Agriculture. At the same time, Borlaug was taking graduate classes on mycology and crossbreeding. Meanwhile, the impact of starvation in Mexico had been especially hard-hitting due to primitive farming methods, a lack of good wheat to plant, and a booming population. Mexico needed a solution, and fast. Within the Rockefeller Foundation, Associate Director of the Health Division, John A. Farrell, was lobbying for a new wheat-growing program in Mexico. After also getting in contact with the Mexican and American governments for funding, the program began in early 1943 with the formation of the Office of Special Studies, a branch of the Mexican government. The program hired Norman Borlaug. In 1944, Borlaug moved to Mexico and started working on producing wheat for the Mexican people. For the next 6 years, from 1944 to 1950, Borlaug began breeding wheat. At first, he went about the process the typical way: plant a few strains, grow, test, repeat. However, he quickly realized that Mexico was running out of time and would need a different way. So, with a leap of faith, Borlaug pioneered his first frontier: shuttle breeding. Shuttle breeding was a revolutionary new tactic, which involved planting wheat at different altitudes and in different hemispheres in order to maximize resiliency and double the crop season. Yet as 1951 rolled around, another problem appeared. 15B stem rust, a deadly wheat pathogen that was spreading like wildfire worldwide, had just reached Mexico, and every type of wheat Borlaug had was susceptible. With problems mounting and time running out, Borlaug searched desperately through the research of the time. Borlaug was able to find one critical piece of information. In 1935, Gunjiro Inuzuka, a Japanese scientist, pioneered a frontier in wheat growing by crossbreeding 2 American varieties and a Japanese semi-dwarf variety of wheat. The result of the 3 strains was Norin 10. So Borlaug pioneered a frontier of his own. He began in 1953 by crossbreeding his successful wheat with Norin 10. From this, Borlaug invented a new, highly productive form of wheat that could support the high yield supplied by the nitrogen fertilizer. After a bit of modification, and with the rapid pace of shuttle breeding, Borlaug was able to make this new wheat mostly resilient to stem rust, yet another major frontier in disease prevention in plants. This final wheat was called Lerma 52, and was the culmination of all of Borlaug's hard work. His advanced scientific breeding methods had made his project one of the most advanced agricultural projects of that time. The Cooperative Wheat Research Program began producing thousands of seeds to spread across Mexico. Reports were widely positive, and by the end of 1956, Mexico was fully agriculturally self-sufficient. But Borlaug didn't stop with Mexico. With high ambitions, Borlaug took a lead role in the international fight against stem rust and expanded his research. His frontier of shuttle breeding was critical to the fast modification of wheat. Borlaug's team also managed to create a new rice crop using his shuttle breeding methods, similar to his wheat. However, cultural beliefs in subsistence farming hindered progress. Additionally, India and Pakistan failed to cooperate on agricultural strategies due to their political differences. Luckily, in the end, Borlaug's tireless diplomacy convinced Indian and Pakistani officials to embrace his agricultural style. The two nations started to import Borlaug's grains and the requisite fertilizers en masse. Borlaug's wheat and its introduction into Mexico and South Asia fed hundreds of millions of people. Many farmers reported doubling or even tripling production. The rapidly growing world's population was fed what it needed to prevent massive famine and starvation. Borlaug was awarded a Nobel Peace Prize in 1970 for his efforts.
I call upon you, Norman Ernest Borlaug, to come to the rostrum and receive the diploma and the gold medal of the Nobel Peace Prize for 1970.
Borlaug's work also inspired many other scientists to breed better plants. In the Philippines, farmers developed the IR-8 strand of rice, which greatly reduced world hunger in many parts of Asia and Africa. This frontier of agricultural improvement was named the Green Revolution, with Borlaug being its father. Most estimates credit the Green Revolution with saving over 1 billion lives, making Norman Borlaug one of the most consequential people in human history. In 1986, Norman Borlaug created the World Food Prize, a globally recognized award to commemorate the achievements of those similar to Borlaug. The award was, and still is, given annually to an individual that advances human development with a demonstrable increase in the quantity, quality, availability of, or access to food. Norman Borlaug unfortunately passed away from lymphoma on September 12, 2009. He was 95 years old. Borlaug's crops were successful in feeding billions. However, they also required an inordinate amount of land, fertilizer, and water usage. These resources were not always readily available or right for a local climate, leading to the overuse of dangerous chemicals in fragile regions. The environmental degradation caused by the Green Revolution was very significant, and many activists rallied against the movement as a whole. At the same time, Borlaug failed the small farmers who he had originally intended to help. He soon realized his crops could only be grown for profit at large-scale farms. The Green Revolution led to a great decrease in the competitiveness of small-scale farmers. However, Borlaug's methods of shuttle breeding and his miracle wheat strains continue to be used today.
And so I urge, when you hear a lot of criticism about science and technology, remember that science and technology is serving all of these purposes that I mentioned before, but it has to be used properly.
Norman Borlaug grew up on a remote Iowan farm with difficult prospects. Borlaug moved to Mexico and started working for the Cooperative Wheat Research Production Program to genetically engineer wheat. Through grit and tireless work, he developed a crop impervious to stem rust and was able to feed hundreds of millions. He spread his crop across the world, overcoming diplomatic hurdles in South Asia. Borlaug and the scientists he inspired set in motion the Green Revolution, an agricultural frontier that potentially saved over 1 billion. Despite being awarded with a Nobel Prize, Borlaug continued to fight tirelessly against world hunger. Although the Green Revolution had its problems, Borlaug's scientific tradition continues to help us today. Norman Borlaug pushed the frontier for science and agriculture. Dr. Borlaug may not be a name known at every kitchen table, but this man is one of the greatest humanitarians who has ever lived. He dedicated his life to the development of scientific breakthroughs. This was all in an effort to ease malnutrition and famine around the world. Senator Chuck Grassley, 2014, U.S. Capitol.